All empires must have a rise and a fall. Some rise with grace and some fall with grace. Some rise rapidly and some fall rapidly. For the great Seljuk state, this rise was like no other. It seemed impossible that a group like the Seljuks could ever even become a somewhat successful state, let alone one of the most powerful empires of all time. In today's video, we will be discussing how the Seljuks rose. The term Seljuk comes from Seljuk Ghazi, the grandfather of the first Seljuk Sultan, Turgul Bey. Turgul Bey established the Seljuk state in 1037 and immediately began conquering land. And in the Battle of Dandanakan in 1040, he solidified Seljuk dominance over Khorasan. And in the 1040s, even conquered all of mainland Persia. The Seljuks' rise was considered a shock to the rest of the Islamic world. Turgul Bey laid the foundation of the Islamic Empire, and he also taught his nephew these traditions and the way of conquest. His nephew was none other than the second Sultan, the conqueror of Anatolia, Sultan Alparslan. Sultan Alparslan greatly expanded the Seljuks into modern-day Anatolia and also in the Middle East. Sultan Alparslan led one of the most famous battles in ancient history, the Battle of Manzikert. In the Battle of Manzikert, the Seljuk Empire was ridiculously outnumbered. However, by fighting with skill and tactically rather than with numbers, and with the help of the chief advisor Nizam al-Mulk, the Seljuks managed to win a decisive victory at Malazgirt against the Byzantine Empire, ending the Byzantine dominance over Anatolia and bringing Islam to that land. This victory flipped the power in the Islamic world to the Seljuks, who had a legendary rivalry with the Fatimids, who were in control of Egypt. But now the major power in the Islamic world was no longer the Fatimids, but was with the Seljuks, who looked to conquer the heart of the Byzantine Empire, Constantinople. Unfortunately, 1 year after Manzikert, Sultan Alparslan was assassinated in 1072, and the man who took the helm was the legendary Sultan Malik Shah. Sultan Malik Shah ruled the Seljuk state in its golden age. This golden age was not just in land and strength, but also in knowledge. During this time, there was a rise in many Islamic scholars, such as Umar al-Khayyam, Isfizari, and Imam Ghazali, the latter of which's books are still incredibly famous even today. This is also the time of the rise of the Nizamiya Madrasas. The Nizamiya Madrasas were created by Grand Vizier Nizam al-Mulk in order to combat the rising Fatimid and Batini ideals. Incredibly, this madrasa's syllabus, which taught the basics of Islam, created back in the 11th century, are still used today in most madrasas around the world. The Sultan himself had a deep love for art and the knowledge, which he promoted to his people. Sultan Malik Shah is famous for creating the Jalali calendar, which was ordered by Nizam al-Mulk and compiled by Umar al-Khayyam. And astonishingly, this calendar is still used today in Iran. Sultan Malik Shah had multiple battles with the neighbouring empires, such as the Karamanids, which he won comfortably against. He also expanded further into Anatolia, and by the late 11th century, the Seljuks were sat right on Constantinople's doorstep. Sultan Malik Shah also had to deal with the issues from within the Seljuk Empire, such as the rise of the Batini, who were an assassin group created by Hassan Sabbah. Hassan Sabbah men were in the Seljuk palace and scattered around the Seljuk state. These issues were heavy, and the Seljuks had a heavy burden. However, despite this, their power was still very much feared throughout the world, as they had the support of the Caliph and were therefore able to call for a huge army if they desired. Many scholars say that if it was not for the events which took place in 1092, the Seljuks could have taken Constantinople. 1092 was undisputably the worst year for the Seljuks up until that point. Despite the fact that the empire reached its greatest extent in that year, in 1092, not only did Nizam al-Mulk, the Grand Vizier of the Seljuk Empire, die, Sultan Malik Shah, the Sultan of the Seljuk Empire, also died, and as well as other high-ranking palace officers. Sultan Malik Shah's death was met by jubilation for the Bathani and Byzantine Empire, and met by devastation from the Seljuk Empire. As after his death, the Seljuks fell into civil war between the youngest son Mahmud I and the older son Berkayuk I. And by 1095, the Seljuks had been put on fire, with the Crusades occurring and many other civil wars, and the Seljuks began to be corrupted from both external and internal issues. Overall, however, the Seljuk rise was seen as an incredible accomplishment. They switched their power in the Islamic world, taking power away from the Fatimids, destroying the Anatolian Byzantines, who would never gain back the power they held at that time. The Seljuks held an incredible amount of knowledge, power and strength, and will not be quickly forgotten. Their weakness was that they did not sort out the right method of succession. And after one sultan would die, often there would be a civil war between the heirs of the throne, which of course would only leave instability. Nevertheless, the Seljuks today are remembered for being one of the most powerful Islamic empires of all time. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please make sure to like and subscribe. Let's try and hit 200 subs before September, inshallah. Thanks for watching, and I shall see you next time.